affordability and accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor Brown.
Okay. Well, I think this is very good. There's been a lot of collaboration. I do want to mention the union support for Proposition 30. I do want to identify, well, I shouldn't identify the biggest contributors, but there are some that were quite extraordinary. I have to at least mention the top, and that was California Teachers Association. People often vilify teachers' unions, but I can tell you they stepped up to the plate. We're talking not a few million, but 7 or 8 million. So I want to pay, and there's a lot of all the other unions, public sector, private sector. They did a hell of a lot. And also we had some nice people who were paid the tax. We had one individual who on a phone call pledged $1 million, and he will be paying this tax. So I wish we could put him in the California Hall of Fame, because he's definitely inspiring. I do want to think, besides the money, and besides whatever my efforts were, a big reason, there are 2 big reasons why Prop 30 passed, in my judgment. And I acknowledge why people win and why they lose is always subject to dispute. But number 1, the obvious cutbacks and hardships visited upon the kindergarten through 12, through the social service programs. We cut the elderly $15 a month from $850 to $835. We cut a lot of things, eliminated redevelopment, and of course the tuition rises, the reduction in the teacher, increase in teacher-student ratios. There was a lot of cutbacks, and that over a 4-year period seeped into the bloodstream out there, and people knew that. Secondly, and most fundamentally, the growing inequality in this country and in this state was not missed by people. People knew that those who were paying this tax, for the most part, were making lots of money. Basically, 85% of the people who pay taxes pay as a husband and wife. And so that group doesn't even pay penny one, so they make over $500,000 adjustable income. The truth of the matter is 99% of the people who went into the ballot box were not going to pay that tax. They paid the quarter-cent tax, the people's tax, and people could well afford to pay a penny on a $4 purchase. And so I think the recognition of the inequality. Now, I want to say something about that, because this becomes a problem in many different ways. John and I are subject to something called the Salary Commission. The Salary Commission has reduced our executive compensation 23%. So my salary is $165,000. Arnold used to make $205,000. By the way, I've not seen any lack of applicants for being governor or being speaker. The appetite for these jobs does not shrink in relationship to the compensation. Maybe that's the psychic income that I once talked about in reference to the university. But I want to put it in a larger context. If I look back, my training, my degree from UC Berkeley was in classics. And I've given occasion in recent time to review the history of the Roman Republic. And the challenge of that republic was the division between the elites, the senators, or what they called the best people, and the plebeians, or the masses, the ordinary folk. And that struggle and how that played out, it didn't work. And it didn't work. They just couldn't resolve. There was too much division. And so the republic, which depended on a franchise of Roman citizens, ultimately was replaced when Augustus Caesar became the principal leader, unelected. So we're facing the same problem here. We have this very difficult conflict. We look in Washington, people say, cut government. Well, government is cut Social Security, cut Medicaid, cut research. Well, that's the common effort to compensate for the ravages of our particular market system and global economy and the introduction of technology. Look at studies. There was Cleveland Federal Reserve System put out a study that said the fruits of productivity growth have almost exclusively gone not to labor, not to working people, but to capital. And the owners of capital are getting more and more funds. In California 30 years ago, the top 1% earned about 10.5% of the income. Now they're taking in over 22%. Now that is a major factor that wasn't, people may not know the details, but they knew when there was an effort to refund our schools and universities, who should pay most. And the arguments of the Wall Street Journal and the economists that it makes the tax volatile, or that only 1% of the people are paying almost 60% of our income tax, that's odd. But one of the problems is it's not what the income tax is, it's what the income is that provides the basis for the tax flow, and that is the growth of inequality, the increasing stratification of the society. We're not in a caste system yet, but we're forming our own little version as it gets harder and harder for people without previous positioning to rise in our society. So that's kind of where we are here. So the world's a little different. Why can't they make an agreement in Washington? It's difficult. And the Republicans who come from districts that are more conservative, they don't want to hear any taxes. The government's wasting money. Democrats represent more people who have lost out, who aren't the owners of capital, who have to live by their work. And they're in a different, less privileged position than they were 30 years ago. And every year, their relative position is changing. So that's the political context. And because you need Republican votes, and the Republicans are saying we want more cuts, some say we want only exclusive cuts. Well, and the Democrats are saying we're not going to cut Social Security, we're not going to do this. So there's the conflict. How do you provide a democratic society in an undemocratic environment? Without sufficient degree of homogeneity, the social fabric does not hold. And that is the meta context that we're facing. So let me take it down to the concrete now. I'd like to give you the general, because we are in a system. It isn't as though the governor, the speaker, the president of the university, or a union can alter the conditions unilaterally in the system we are all embedded in. So, but let's just, understanding that we all have to work together, no one person has the lever in their hands, but all of us together, hopefully, can reverse this growth to inequality and generate the funds for the common endeavor, which is called government. And when I believe most of what government does is a good, and when we cut what government is doing, it's a bad because we're cutting good. But nevertheless, we got to live in our means. And fiscal discipline is not the enemy of democratic governance, but rather its fundamental predicate. If we can't live within our means and accommodate what everybody feels is rightfully theirs, the system does break down, and it will break down. So let's take the UC model, which is embedded in the higher education model. Number one, unfortunately, teaching, or as you call it, instruction costs, are going to have to be brought down without compromising quality. I'm not going to tell you how to do that, but that's one of the factors that I put in my budget. You got to think about it, and we're going to think about it together. The time to degree. How long? Only 60% make it in 4 years. Maybe it's only a few months longer. Faster time to degree will save money, get people through. It's less money for them. The graduation rate is 60%, as I understand it. So these are the numbers I would get. Whatever they are, the quicker you get through, the fewer courses you have to take to get the job done, the less money you got to put into it. And so those are two, time to degree and graduation rate. What are the non-teaching costs? We need some greater understanding. What is the cost of undergraduate education? Santa Barbara breaks that out on their webpage. No other college does that. What is tuition paying for in terms of the students? Okay? What's graduate instruction? What's research? What are the other costs? Are the athletic costs completely separated from any of the tuition costs? And for now and down the road, because you mix in the bond issues for these facilities, athletic facilities, and some of that bleed in to costs that ultimately will show up. The state, getting to another macro picture here in California, the personal income is growing at 4%. Okay, that's what it's been the last few years. Maybe it'll grow more. A guy named Robert Gordon, a very famous economist, put out a paper in September. He said, our growth rate, looking down the road here, is going to be less than half of what it's been in the next 30 years of what it's been before. And the reason, the aging population, the global economy, and the fact that so much of the reward is going to disproportionately to the top, this is going to affect the economy. Well, it's just one economist paper, but we got to get ready for a future that may not generate the dividends that we've seen in the past. So with that 4% growth, you come in with 11% or whatever you want to say. Well, I heard your response. You had to pay $300 million for your retirement costs. Well, so does the California. We had to take care of PERS. We have to take care of the teachers' retirement system. That's a couple of billion right there. We haven't paid for that yet. We had something called a wall of debt. That's $27 billion. We got to pay Arnold's recovery bond back. That's about $1 billion every year. We got to pay some obligations to the county. We have to pay, we robbed the recycling fund about $1 billion. We got all these special funds, and we've taken $9–10 billion from the schools in so-called deferrals. We say you get the money, but we don't give it to you now. You get it later. So we got to pay that down. After we pay that down, we got an unfunded liability in PERS, Public Employees Retirement System. We have I don't know, $60 billion in retiree health costs, commitments we can't get out of unless the judge in the Stockton case, or in the cases coming out of San Jose and San Diego, rule that vested rights can be modified, which, who knows, I wouldn't bet against that. So you got a business model. I understand the word quality. I've been reading many books on the university. I'm going back to Kant and Humboldt. Schilling and Fichte. I want to understand how this German model got going here. More recently, I read a book on the university in ruins, and in that, now this was he was saying the model is broken.
Andrew Hacker?
No, this was not Andrew Hacker. This is a Canadian teacher, but they're looking. Everybody's questioning, what do we do about higher education? Okay, so I want to be a help. I went to the University of California, not very long, but I got my degree. I paid my $125 a semester. My mother went 30 years before me. She paid $26 a month. And so it's hard for me to get used to big tuition costs. Even you tell me how good it is, and I can tell you California is 47th in student debt. 47th. So we're really good. Put it the other way, we're right in the top, the very top. Better than Texas, better than almost every other state in the small debt load of undergraduate students. Hallelujah. It's good, but nevertheless, it's just when you had a free university for 100 years, it's very hard to get not used to that. And so you're looking at that experience. One of the problems of one of the aspects of being at my state in life, I remember stuff. So I remember what the tuition was. And my mother used to tell me about what the tuition was. So there's a little bit of nostalgia there that's going to work against you. The other thing about the student debt, you said, okay, you had to pay your retirement costs. That's part of the cost of doing business. Building these buildings is part of the cost. Having your security is part of the cost. There's no free lunch here. Everything has to be incorporated into the cost. These are not externalities. These are internal to the cost of providing this education. So you have to figure out how to deal with that $300 million. Now, you said $500 million because you raised tuition twice as fast as general fund aid went down. Now, you had to then give $500 back to the students. John made the point, well, what about the middle class? You know, they're not chopped liver either. We got to think about that. This is a very important part of America. But the other part of that is the $500 million is the direct consequence of your tuition increases. So you're kind of chasing your tail here. You raise it and then you compensate for it, but then the state has to meet that. You have to meet it. But if you didn't raise it in the first point, you wouldn't have that $800 million cost. Also, the state is giving you money. State is our Cal Grant program in the last 6 or 7 years has gone up. It's more than doubled. More than doubled. For the university, I don't know, 600, 700 million. So that's money that's flowing that you need. The capital outlay, that's kind of a free good. We don't count that. Well, now we want to put that into the budget. So you see the total cost, whether it's the university, whether it's the police, whether it's the research, whether it's the athletics, whether it's the amenities arms race. I want to underline the amenities arms race because now everybody expects things to be a little better. And yet we're in this context where the model doesn't work. And the model doesn't work in Washington. It doesn't work in Greece. It's not working in the Eurozone. It's not working here. So we have to get out of our comfort zone. We have to look at this thing in a way, how do we maintain, enhance this wonderful institution called the University of California. And I'm a person, been around a long time. I care about this university. I love learning. I love research. But I'm a realist. And we've got to figure out how to make it work together. So I want to understand better how you distribute these costs. Let's unpack the various costs and let's look at what they are. And we got to look at research. You got to look at teaching load. I mean, I don't take a sabbatical. Every 4 years I may get thrown out. I'm always looking at retirement. But I work a lot. And, I get paid more. I pay more taxes. And I work harder. And I love it. I've never loved my job more than I do today. So that's psychic income. I know the university never lived that down. And how it all, just for you to remember the story, I proposed in January 9% raise for the faculty. And then in May, I thought the budget had decreased. So I reduced the 9 to 6. And I said the faculty makes it up in psychic income. I don't make those statements anymore. That left a scar in my relationship with many professors. So today, this is a generous spirit, an opening, a willingness to work together. We're dealing not just with UC. We're dealing with California. We're dealing with America. We're dealing with the West. How are we going to make it as us old white guys age, as the other kind of people with different marks than I have come through here and say, hey, what about us? Do we now get, are we chopped liver? What do we get at K through 12? And if you just, 2 more figures. What's different in 25 years? Well, the prisons, when I was governor the last time, took 2.5% of the general fund. 3 years ago, it went up to 11.5%. That's also implicated in the growing stratification and lack of mobility, and the lack of safety net at the bottom, and the lack of, the minimum wage under Nixon was 60% higher than it is today. Then Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is huge to what it was. This thing's been growing way beyond, when I talk about 4% growth and personal income when I was governor was 17% because of the inflation, among other things. But Medi-Cal, what is Medi-Cal about? It's about old people who can't take care of themselves. It's about new technology. So we got Medi-Cal to take care of. That's up to 20% of the budget. Prisons I've driven down far below what it was, still pretty high. So that's all a product of the big macro picture of a society whose social fabric is altering, changing, and fraying. So this is a big lift here. We got a big challenge, and we got to think big. We got to get out of our. This is a research institution. Let's do research. Let's think, and let's not get imprisoned by paradigms of the past that are now obsolete. And that's my thought here. That we have to be wiser. We have to search out different perspectives, and it's not about the union, AFSCME versus somebody else, or the students versus the Regents. No, all that adversarial leads to distortion, because in adversarial combat, the stronger partner may not have the better case. And what we need to get off the adversary, because we're all in it, we're all part of it, and what we want to find is the wisdom and the understanding to bring this university through this regime crisis that we're all a part of. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a number of regents that want to comment, so I'm going to take them in order of the request, but if you could do your best to be succinct so we can complete.
Families that they need to take care of. And I would hate to see us try to save $100,000 or $50,000 because it looks good politically, but it reduces our ability to go after the very best leaders. And you know, we're not trying to spend money wildly around here. We're doing everything we can to save money, but if we try to save a little bit of money on our leaders, our leadership, I think we are going to lose lots and lots of money in the future. And I'm not proposing that we try to use state money for executive compensation, but we have been establishing a model where we are able to raise private money from donors who are very interested in having the very best leadership, who will supplement that compensation. And all I'm asking is that if we do that, if we're able to cap executive compensation from the state at a certain amount and are able to increase that with private funds, that you not then tear us apart for trying to do the best we can, because we are going to need the best leadership that we can get to get through these next few years. Thank you.
Could I respond to that, since that was directed to me, and it's good to have a dialogue here. I agree leadership counts, and I would underscore that, but I wouldn't characterize this concern of mine as looking good politically, unless by political you mean political in the largest sense of the word, the health of the polis, the health of the community, of our whole society, of the union, trying to keep it together. So there's a moral issue here. So getting it from the private sector doesn't really overcome my biggest concern. Obviously, salaries at the top are relatively small, but I'm concerned that the university gets caught in this process where institutions that are aimed at upward mobility actually reconfirm and more deeply embed the very stratification and the trends toward greater stratification that we're already experiencing. So I'm not trying to, I don't know, attack or make you look bad, but I just have to tell you from my life experience, my upbringing, my training, maybe I spent too long with vows. I did take a vow of poverty. I'm sorry, I did that. Solemn vow, as a matter of fact. In fact, it's a perpetual vow. But the Pope absolved me from executing it after I left the seminary. But I still runs around in my head here. And not that I want to make anybody poor. I want people to get rich. But if we don't have a tight-knit, if our society pulls apart too much, as it is, we're going to have a very hard time governing. You heard the group from AFSCME make their pitch. And that's playing or working with this theme that is haunting all of us. So I know you can't change the global economy or the effects of technology on the distribution of income, but we just have to be mindful of it, and that's why I use the phrase servant leadership. I started to talk about the book University in Ruins by Professor Reading from Canada, no longer alive, and I didn't make the point that I wanted. He said in that book, excellence has no referent. It's it's a term internal to the university. And I think the same thing applies to excellence. It's a term everybody invokes. But here's a man, serious professor, writing a book, and he's questioning where I understand smarter is better than dumber, and more productive is better than less productive. But the word quality, is that how many times your paper is cited in footnotes? Or, this quality is more problematic than we acknowledge. So that was the point I wanted to make on the University in Ruins. The next point I want to make, coming in the more recent period, if you go back to, well, this is not recent, but if you go back to 1870, 1880, the minority of teachers at Harvard and Yale had PhDs. They didn't have PhDs. The requirements and the curricula for undergraduate was very different, and the relationship between the professional schools to the undergraduate was very different. People who became doctors didn't do an undergraduate PA, and then this all changes. We've had lots of changes in general studies. Higher education, like everything else, is not static. It changes. It has a tradition, but it also has, we have to adapt. I mean, it's almost like, we have our DNA moves very slowly over millions, billions of years, but then we adapt by changing the environment. So we're adapting here, but we want to maintain the basic DNA of the university. And this business of rankings, I have to say, when I read looking through the audit report for UCSF, by the way, I was just reading it in my spare time, and I noticed they quote the U.S. News and World Report about how the children's program is fifth, or the other is the top. Well, I don't look to Mr. What's his name, Zuckerberg, who I know, as my mentor here. These rankings, they take all these different factors and they congeal them into one number, and they say you're 5 or 10 or 20. I think the University of California, and California is big enough, that we set the rankings. Now, I know you got a market, and people say, I'm not coming to California because Texas will pay me more, or we get more research or more assistance. Well, those are all true, so I'm not trying to deny the world as it is. I'm just saying that this is a very powerful state, and this is a very powerful university. So we have to lead. I like that. We want to lead. And I'm not saying exactly how to do that. I'm telling you, I am engaged in this challenge with you, not against you. And, they made me back in they made the governor the president of the Regents back there in 1868 for some reason. And I'm researching that now. I want to find out why the hell they want the governor here. But evidently somebody did. So here I am. And I want to work through this stuff. Now, let me make 2 practical points, because people always say I'm thinking global. Let me get down to the specifics. Online is one pathway. Where it leads, we don't know. But let's go for it. Riverside Medical Program, I got to be concerned. I am concerned. I haven't bought off on that yet. We hear about the Obamacare. What's that going to do to the medical system? How are you going to fare? Is that going to change your cost structure? I get nervous. And now you want to take on another one. Maybe it's not a hospital. Maybe it's a medical program. You have to be careful. And you got to look down the road. The university, a lot of smart people here, but you went on a pension holiday for a long time. So not everybody who's so smart always makes the right decisions. That's why we have a lot of different people around here to collaborate. So hopefully we minimize our mistakes. So there it is. You kind of look at that Riverside Medical Program, look at online, And I just want to reiterate about research, because obviously some implications, you can infer that I'm looking for cost savings across a wide swath, and research wouldn't be exempt from that. I like research. I like the new. But I want to distinguish genuinely new knowledge from novelty. And I think this, so I don't want to judge. I know this is academic freedom, and I don't want to, angels fear to tread. I'm not going to jump into your process here. But I do want to say I like ideas of research. I don't want to put all the money down a rat hole of incarceration, and I don't even want to put all the money taking care of characters like me, and I'm going to get more costly. Okay, so we got to balance it. How much do we take care of the poor? How much do we care of the elderly? How much for locking up people? How much for rehabilitating drunks and drug addicts? And how much brilliant, excellent, elite people who are going to pioneer all these great things? Well, I'm pushing, and John helped us, high-speed rail. A lot of people are scared. Oh, high-speed rail, how can you find $65 billion when I'm quibbling about a medical program? Well, we got to chew gum and jump rope at the same time. We've got to invest in new things that can lead to greater wealth later. We need a Delta facility to assure water. If we don't put up $14 billion to assure water quality, and we get an earthquake, you could cut off 50% of the water to Santa Clara County, and that's Silicon Valley. We would not recover. So certain things, you've got to think big, you've got to invest, and you've got to think down the road. Just like climate change. People don't want to invest in climate change. That's the big equalizer. We keep getting deeper in debt, more inequality, and then the climate ups the cost. So all I'm saying is, with all these big concerns out there, let's move carefully. Let's look at all the collective wisdom here, and through this wonderful process, let's make the best decisions we can possibly make. And I pledge that my mind is open. Okay? I believe if you know where you're going, you're already dead. So I confess. And now they'll write about it in the paper, and I'll pay for it. I don't know where I'm going, but I know I'm going to get there.
Thank you. Regent Blum.
Well, first of all, I think this is a...
Well, that concludes this item, and I think obviously... yes, Governor.
I don't want to be heard that I'm not appreciative of the great work you're doing. Cutting ad costs, all the work you do, the importance of the university. We have to be able to express thoughts without having them overly interpreted. So I see not one factor, no silver bullet here. There's multiple factors. There's a very complex pattern. And I, for one, I like new ideas, I like research. But I also know that you have to adapt. And that's really what we're talking about. Adaptation, not to decline, but adaptation to soar. So that's my point. And I see this, there's no one in this room who has the answer. And I really appreciate the Regents here. And I have to say, since I've probably seen more Regents than most of the people around this table, this is the greatest group of Regents, at least compared to the last crowd I had. So I guess that's Arnold and... No, I'm just telling you, I think Arnold and Gray did a little better than my predecessors. So I'm very excited about that. Maybe that's why I haven't been able to come to appoint any new ones. I find the chemistry here so good, I don't want to disrupt it. Anyway, that's my point. Collaboration, inquiry. No, it's not, it's not more of, it may be design change. And I don't know quite what that is, but I'm sure excited to be part of this very rich and diverse group of minds. If anyone's going to get it, we're going to get it right here.